Alright, I thought I would make one more video on the topic and give a very short form set of benefits of my idea for a lebensraum of love. Now, Otto emerged from the West to conquer the genes and cultures of the rest of the world and solves the problem of cannibalizing ourselves. The too long didn't read version is we should gene stealer cult the third world into becoming the first world genetically and culturally at the same time. One is either shrinking slash retreating or growing slash advancing. Stalemates and neutrality is an accident slash byproduct of the switch between the two modes. Someone's always losing on the man front in relation to having a woman. Either they die prematurely or grow old and die as incels due to the roughly 55/45% birth rate difference between men or women, respectively. Why not make it the other races and countries and nations and civilizations' men, not ours? Plenty of access to women for our men removes feminism's power as well. Once more of the world is first world in genetics and culture and technology and infrastructure and social dynamics, we can actually unite based on shared kinship and values and go to the stars and blow up our populations to the without end, like make our populations increase without end over galactic colonization timescale. Birth rates will even out between men and women, and even the diluted genetics of the other races will be more numerous of the native locals from the various nations aside from ours. So everybody wins medium long term. Now the clincher is that if we put our genetics into the mix of the foreign nations, they'll become more civilized, so they'll be able to participate in space programs better than if it were just their native population genetics alone. So that's the prerequisite to them joining the space adventures and exploration and colonization of the galaxy. Basically what we're going to do is, if we do this, we can outcompete the inbreeders, the female aborters, the people that abort female babies, and the corruption-prone individuals and their genetics, and the very violent people who are just bullies and warlords, essentially from like Africa or something. The remaining genetics of the local natives abroad, around the world, will thrive in a civilized manner finally. It's a positive vision and goal to conquer the world, galaxy, and then the other galaxies or universe. Something hopeful to work for beyond mere survival or continuation within a very limited space on Earth. Unless we encounter aliens, pioneering space won't be as big of a problem as pioneering North America in modern opinions, more or less. And we're not killing people, we're not genociding people, we're just race mixing abroad and keeping it relatively pure at home. And leftist men will get their exotic outgroup favoring desires fulfilled with exotic beauties and cultures if we convince them to go on adventures abroad to settle down and marry a foreign woman. While it'll make them loyal to traditionalism, even if by mercenary means because they get a good wife who's exotic due to their outgroup preference, but also the woman will start off at least as much more conservative and traditional, so it'll that will also make the men relatively traditional more often. Or the next generations will be more traditional. And if we offload and this is a split from the suggestions I've been making here, but it's an alternative route to the thing a little bit, where we let people like just sort of self-select based on out-group preferences. They go on adventures abroad, or in-group preferences, they stay at home. This is a split from that to a direct approach where basically the suggestion as an alternative is we specifically offload our delinquents and minorities, the men, to the rest of the world, and then we get rid of them from our own society, and they get to live in a society more suited to their temperament while being not total leeches, because the barrier to entry into being productive is less, because they're not as advanced. However, this also will gene steal or cult the third world a little bit, because a lot of our minorities are mixed race. So the first world civilized genetics will still make some headway into the rest of the world. Now keep in mind that little option is basically a very cynical option relative to the first one, where we're essentially blessing the rest of the world with our genetics and culture by overflowing with our superiority, as opposed to offloading our undesirables to them, the men, for breeding purposes. As a two divergent possibilities, but it might be also that what's going to happen is, because leftist men are more undesirable naturally, the two options are actually the same option. Because leftist men like their exotic beauties, although right-wing men do too. But the right-wing men love the exotic beauties because they're more traditionalist, and the left-wing men love their exotic beauties because they're out-group. The right-wing men can invite the woman over, whereas the left-wing men should travel over and use the superiority of our nations and culture and wealth and power to impress the woman over there, who are used to the grubby, low-tier men, and so on. Kind of like how one lives abroad, say in like the Philippines, where like $5 is worth $1,000 over there or something. You know what I mean? That exchange rate between currencies, where the currency favors the American dollar over whatever the local currency is. So if you get $1,000, then it's worth like, you can buy like $10,000 worth of stuff by switching the $1,000 to the local currency. And you go from buying $1,000 worth of stuff in America to buying $10,000 worth of stuff in the local area. So you're relatively more wealthy. So it embraces hypergamy through the rest of the world, but it forces women to actually lower their standards and become monogamous and stop being feminists over here, and stabilizes over here, whereas the men abroad will lose out. The lowest tier of men abroad will lose out, and so on. But someone always loses. So unless we're gonna like go to war over things, you're gonna have incels at some point. On like no matter what, you're gonna have a certain degree of incels. My suggestion is we make it the other people's, not our own people's, the incels. And this has the benefit of civilizing people enough to join the space race and colonize the galaxy, and then everybody wins in the end. Whereas if they colonize us completely, we never get beyond the moon, or we never get to the moon again, basically. That kind of thing. So it's us winning over them, everybody wins in the long run. But them winning over us means everybody loses in the long run. Because we are civilized, we are advanced, we are societally and possibly technologically superior because of our genetics that lend themselves to the environment of technology and maintaining the environment of technology, not just the natural environment, and living in the environment of technology, and producing advanced societies. And then when everybody's more advanced, because of our genetic contributions and cultural contributions at the same time, whatever genetics are unfit amongst the other races will naturally be weeded out due to selection pressures, natural selection, not eugenics. We're not planning this out in terms of who gets to breed or have children or who dies or who gets sterilized. We're not planning any of that out. We're just getting out of our own way to produce natural selection pressures on the men so that the weakest of the foreign men and their genetics diminish. Because ours are generally superior. However, combining our superior genetics with their genetics that are actually quite good, not all of their genetics, but some of their genetics or a lot of their genetics are quite good in their own way, various things here and there, a little specialized maybe, but still good. Means that overall their remaining genetics will actually be able to, through the space race, because they're more civilized through us, producing them more civilized through our genetics and culture, be able to partake in the ultimate gift of a blowing up population numbers of colonizing the galaxy and the universe. This way it's not just the West colonizing space with everybody else losing out. However, what this means is even if somehow we become too nihilistic and weak, and they use our portion of genetics combined with their vitality inducing local native genetics from the foreigners, and they do the space race better, our genetics are covered anyways. So it resolves the problem by offloading our problems onto the rest of the world for the mate selection. However, this also means that more civilized people will also make more environmentally friendly choices to slow global warming or climate change or whatever you want to call it, if it's real and man-made. And just better pollution restrictions on pollution and so on. Better environmentalism and so on. Because we'll actually care about the environment and life will be better. So people will actually care about the environment more because they're not starving or freezing or something like that. And they can drink clean water because we have the dispositions due to genetics and culture to take care of ourselves better societally, and the infrastructure and there'll be more high trust societies throughout the world and so on. And basically what'll happen is it'll just be better for whatever genetics are left. I'm not saying we totally replace them. I'm not like the Tau Va from Warhammer 40k exactly. But sort of gene stealer cult from the first world to the third world, all over the place, into the first world. Or something approximating it. So we still want some of their genetics, and I'm not deciding ahead of time which genetics. Just whatever lends itself towards inbreeding, killing female fetuses or babies in the womb, and is corruption and bully, violence prone relative to our own nations and cultures and civilizations, societies, not cultures. Those parts will be statistically bred out by competition and us out competing those inferior aspects of the genetics statistically and iteratively over generations. And this means that also there will be a place where the globalists and the elites that are sacrificing our own people or their own people, the Europeans and the North Americans, to sabotage their competition for leadership because they feel insecure because we're almost as good as them or better often. By turning it outwards again instead of cannibalizing inwards, we solve the traitor problem amongst the elites. And also, by combining the civilized nature of our people and the vitality-inducing nature of the savages, we solve the problem of too much of one or the other. However, we do it without removing the civilized nature of Europe and North America, which is only 9% of the world population. So we need more civilization abroad. And what can also happen is if we selection pressure out the lowest quality woman because we're looking for the highest quality foreign woman typically, then what that means is the stressors on our population will diminish. Or the woman will have to smarten up personally and psychologically and culturally and become good wives essentially. And then we'll heal the fatherless society because no-fault divorce won't matter as much because you can just leave the country, find a new wife and marry her in another country and live traditionally and stably in a family unit, proper family unit that way. And, it just solves all the problems for us and offloads them to other people. But you can't get something from nothing. God can do that, but humans can't. No animal can. No plant can. Right? We're always reliant on the external to us environment or area or place or existence to feed into us what we need. So that's a thing. I'm kind of repeating myself over the course of these 3 videos, but I wanted to really hammer home just how good of an idea this is. Right? And I know some people will be like, well, that's not fair. Why are you offloading your problems to the other nations? Because they're trying to do it to us. Turnabout is fair play. And besides, it's not exactly turnabout. It's not even turnabout. Because when we do it to them, they get better. When they do it to us, we get worse. They mistakenly think they make us better. We rightfully think we make them better. And what we learned is the Nazis' lebensraum, the genetic replacement of extermination and then moving in, was very nasty and inappropriate and so on. And the multicultural globalism, the democratization of Iraq and Afghanistan and so on failed because the people aren't good enough for those things as we consider good. The democratic principle and democratic instinct due to genetics, essentially. The things that lead to democracy personally in aggregate amongst all the various interactions that cascade in a society between individuals that lead to a functioning high trust society that leads to democracy. So what we do is we don't genocide anyone, we don't impose culture on anyone without building the genetic foundation so that the cultural influence actually keeps the beachhead and expands stably into proper democracy as we understand it. However, what this means is if we do this, then our 9% white society throughout the world of the population, total world population, will expand into mixed race into the rest of the 91% of the population worldwide. So instead of us being replaced into oblivion, we will reduce the population percentage of their genetics, say by 30% of all the races. However, instead of removing their genetics, we'll be contributing our genetics to theirs, and therefore it'll be a fairer, more equal distribution of our genetics worldwide. Because we used to be 35%. We're 9% now. And this will give us genetic security while also improving the lives of the people who are mixed race now, because our genetics lead to civilized behavior more often. So whatever of the genetics is left will be better off than if they were not to mix race with us in their own nations. But we're so small a minority that if they mix race in our nations, then we essentially die off as a power or force or group, and so on. So it's not even like total replacement or lots of replacement or something like that. It's enrichment of them culturally and genetically while keeping our own stocks secure so that we can be stable, but they will actually be more stable due to our genetic and cultural influence as a civilization, which will lead to a natural increase in productivity and so on, and equitable distribution of wealth and so on, and prosperity, so they'll win medium long term regardless. Anyways, okay, I've repeated myself a third time, I guess, here. But this is the general plan that I'm giving out. I'm really excited for this plan. It gives us something to strive for and work for, right? Beyond just closing the breach in our defenses and stabilizing at home and licking our wounds. It gives us something to work towards beyond mere barely scraping by survival for our civilization, and gives them something to develop towards in the civilizing direction, so that the meaning crisis is averted globally, essentially, where they can play catch up because we're giving them the genetics and culture where they can actually begin to do so, so they don't have the inferiority complex and misery of low trust societies as well. And then we get the meaning of expanding our people's existence throughout the world. And then we all get the meaning of expanding our existence as a whole world throughout the galaxy, and then the various other galaxies of the universe. So I've basically thought about this from all angles, and this is the path forwards so that we all win in the end.